30 days, Madison Reed said, smiling across the candlelit table. Pick any Omega in this room, marry her, and prove you can last a month without regretting it. King Ethan Blackwood watched her lips because her voice belonged to a world he could no longer enter. Around him, the winter moon ball shimmered beneath crystal chandeliers, nearly 300 guests moving through Blackwood Palace in black velvet, winter silver, and jeweled gowns. A string quartet performed beneath the royal crest. Ethan saw bows sweep across polished instruments. He saw couples laugh. He felt the faint vibration of music through the stem of his champagne glass. He heard nothing. 12 years of silence had taught him to notice what sound allowed other people to ignore. A tightening jaw. A dishonest smile. The moment someone turned away before saying what they did not want a deaf king to understand. Ryan Cole moved into Ethan's line of sight. Do not encourage her. Ethan read the warning easily. Madison leaned forward. Afraid I am right? Ethan should have dismissed the wager. Marriage was not entertainment, and some nameless Omega did not deserve to become the answer to a challenge. But pride had survived where his hearing had not. Ethan placed his glass on the table. 30 days. Madison's smile widened. Then choose. Ethan looked across the ballroom without interest until a young woman in a plain forest green dress crossed between the glittering guests carrying a worn wooden medicine case. Emily Carter. He recognized her from the Eastern Infirmary records. 23. Omega. Healer. No influential family. No political value. Almost no one noticed when an elderly servant dropped a folded cloth near her feet. Emily did. She stopped, picked it up, then noticed the woman's trembling hand. Instead of continuing toward the infirmary, Emily opened her case, found a small bottle, and quietly placed it in the servant's palm. She did not glance toward the royal table to see who might be watching. Ethan's expression changed. Her, he said. Ryan stared at him. Madison followed his gaze and gave a delighted laugh Ethan could only see. Across the room, Emily continued toward the infirmary corridor, unaware that a foolish decision had just reached across the ballroom and chosen her. Then the silver bell beside the corridor door began to swing. Ethan could not hear it, but something deep inside his left ear tightened with sudden pressure. His hand rose before he could stop it. He pressed 2 fingers beneath his ear and waited for the familiar discomfort to pass. 12 years of royal healers had called it meaningless. A remnant. A symptom without an answer. Ethan had stopped asking questions years ago. Emily had not. She was nearly 40 feet away when she stopped walking. Her pale green eyes settled first on the moving silver bell, then on Ethan's hand against his ear. Her expression sharpened. Not pity. Recognition. Ethan slowly lowered his hand. Emily remained still among the moving guests, studying him as if the entire ballroom had disappeared. Then Ethan gestured to 2 royal guards. They approached her and delivered his summons. Emily's face went pale. She looked toward the royal table, but her attention returned almost immediately to his left ear. Ethan expected fear when she began walking toward him. Instead, he saw concentration. A healer's concentration. By the time Emily stopped before the king, she had already noticed the detail that 12 years of celebrated physicians had dismissed. A man who could hear nothing had reacted to a bell. Emily had crossed crowded rooms before, but never one that seemed to notice every step she took. The royal guard stopped several feet from Ethan's table and moved aside. She held her wooden medicine case against her skirt while nobles nearby lowered their voices and watched. Madison Reed looked entertained. Ryan Cole looked concerned. Ethan looked only at Emily. That was the first thing she noticed up close. His attention was unusually precise. When Ryan said something beside him, Ethan did not react until Ryan shifted into his line of sight and repeated it. When Madison spoke while turning toward the ballroom, Ethan missed her words completely. Emily understood. He was reading lips. She faced him directly and lowered her head. Your Majesty. Ethan's silver-gray eyes moved to her mouth, then back to her eyes. Something faint changed in his expression. Emily suspected most people either shouted at him or exaggerated every word. She did neither. I was told you wanted to see me. Ethan glanced toward Madison before reaching for a small writing pad beside his glass. His handwriting was controlled and angular. Emily Carter. Eastern Infirmary. She nodded. Yes. He wrote again. You are a healer? I am. Madison leaned closer. A very ordinary one. Emily heard the insult. Ethan did not, because Madison had deliberately turned her face away. Emily looked at her for one quiet second, then returned her attention to Ethan. She would not repeat cruelty merely because he had been prevented from hearing it. Ethan noticed that too. Before he could write another question, the infirmary door opened behind Emily. The silver bell above it rang sharply. Ethan's fingers tightened around his pen. His left shoulder stiffened. Then his hand rose toward his ear. Emily watched the reaction from only a few feet away this time. It was unmistakable. "Does that hurt?" she asked. Ethan's eyes narrowed. He wrote, "What?" Emily pointed toward his left ear. "The bell. When it rings, you feel pain." Ryan became very still. Madison's smile faded. Ethan stared at Emily, then wrote, "I cannot hear the bell." "I know." Emily set her medicine case carefully beside her feet. Her heartbeat had quickened, but curiosity was stronger than fear. "How long have you been deaf?" Ethan's jaw tightened. He wrote, 12 years. "And how long has your ear hurt?" A pause. 12 years. Emily felt a cold thread of suspicion form beneath her ribs. Have the healers explained why certain vibrations still cause pain? Ethan wrote, "Permanent damage can cause discomfort." Emily read the sentence twice. It sounded like the kind of answer people repeated after hearing it often enough. She looked toward the bell. "May I test something?" Ethan gave a cautious nod. Emily asked Ryan to close the infirmary door gently. The bell moved again, producing a softer chime. Ethan flinched almost imperceptibly. Emily stepped closer, stopping at a respectful distance. "You reacted before you saw the bell. Move." Ethan's gaze sharpened. Around them, the winter moon ball continued in glittering motion, but the small circle near the royal table had gone silent. Emily knew she was challenging 12 years of royal medicine in front of the king himself. She chose her next words carefully. "If your hearing is simply gone, then why does that specific vibration still reach something inside your left ear?" Ethan did not write. Emily could see the question forming behind his eyes. She lowered her voice, still facing him clearly. "Your Majesty, I do not think pain is proof that nothing can be done. Sometimes pain is the body trying to tell us where to look." For the first time that evening, Ethan forgot about Madison's wager. He forgot the 30 days. He stared at the unknown Omega he had chosen as a joke and realized she was looking at his silence as if it were not an ending, but a clue. By the time the last guests left the winter moon ball, Emily had been offered a marriage she could not explain. Ethan asked her to follow him into a private receiving room beyond the ballroom, where the music became muffled behind heavy oak doors. To him, Emily realized, nothing had changed. Silence followed him everywhere. Ryan remained near the fireplace while Ethan stood beside a tall window overlooking the snow-covered palace grounds. He handed Emily a sheet of paper. "I want you to marry me." Emily read the sentence twice. Her first thought was that she had misunderstood. Her second was that kings did not make mistakes with words this simple. "Why me?" Ethan watched her lips before writing his answer. You noticed something others did not. It was true, but Emily sensed space around the truth, something deliberately left empty. "Is this about my being a healer?" Ethan hesitated. "Partly. Is it political?" "No." Ryan looked toward the fire. The movement was small, almost meaningless, but Emily had spent years watching patients hide discomfort behind smaller gestures than that. Something was being withheld. Still, Ethan did not pressure her. He explained in writing that she could continue working in the Eastern Infirmary, keep her independence, and refuse any royal obligation she had not freely accepted. Emily thought about the strange pain in his ear and the question no one seemed willing to ask. Then she looked at the most powerful man in the Northern Territories waiting silently for her choice. "I will marry you," she said, "but I remain a healer." Ethan's expression softened. "Agreed." The ceremony took place the following evening beneath hundreds of white candles. Emily wore a simple ivory gown chosen from the palace wardrobe, while Ethan stood beneath the Blackwood crest in formal black and silver. Nearly 300 guests watched the unknown Omega walk toward their king. Emily heard whispers following her down the aisle. "Infirmary girl. Nobody. Why her?" She kept walking. Ethan could hear none of them. When the officiant began, he followed each sentence by watching the man's mouth. Twice, guests shifted and blocked his view. When Emily's turn came, she stepped slightly closer and faced him directly. "I enter this marriage by my own choice," she said clearly. And whatever truth stands between us, I promise to meet it honestly. Ethan's eyes changed at the word truth. Only for a heartbeat. Emily noticed. His own vow followed, measured and careful, his voice shaped by 12 years without hearing itself. When the ceremony ended, applause filled the hall. Ethan saw hands meeting, but heard nothing. Emily turned toward him and smiled, giving him one expression in the crowded room that required no translation. For the first time, his royal composure nearly disappeared. Then Emily noticed Madison Reed standing beside a marble column. Madison raised her champagne glass toward Ryan with a triumphant smile. Ryan did not return it. His face tightened instead. Madison silently formed 2 words. Emily could not hear them from across the hall, but she could read lips too. 30 days. The warmth left her face. She looked at Ethan, remembering the sudden proposal, Ryan's discomfort, and the answer that had felt incomplete. Ethan was watching her, unaware of what she had just seen. Emily did not confront him. Not yet. She had learned that truth revealed itself differently when people believed it was still hidden. She smiled again, but this time, the smile never reached her eyes. Somewhere inside the celebration, a clock began counting down 30 days to something Emily had never agreed to. Emily did not ask Ethan what 30 days meant. Not that night, and not the morning after. She had learned from years of treating frightened patients that pressing too hard could make the truth retreat. So she carried the question quietly while beginning her new life inside Blackwood Palace. Her private suite connected to Ethan's chambers through a small sitting room, but there was no expectation waiting behind the arrangement. Instead, she found her worn medicine case placed carefully beside a writing desk and a folded note resting on top. The Eastern Infirmary remains yours. You may work whenever you wish. Emily read it twice before writing beneath his words. That is a surprisingly practical wedding gift. The note disappeared beneath the connecting door. A minute later, it returned. I was advised to buy jewelry. Emily smiled. Jewelry is terrible at treating fever. Ethan's reply came quickly. I begin to understand why no court advisor recommended marrying a healer. Despite herself, Emily laughed. Then she remembered he could not hear it. The thought stayed with her through the following days. Their marriage developed through paper, gestures, and observation rather than conversation. At breakfast, Ethan left short notes beside her coffee. During dinner, Emily made certain she faced him whenever she spoke. At council gatherings, she quietly repeated important remarks when careless nobles turned away before finishing their sentences. She never made a performance of helping him. Ethan noticed anyway. By the 5th day, his notes had changed from formal questions to dry humor. 3 hours of council debate about winter grain. I am considering becoming a shepherd. Emily wrote back. The sheep might object. His answer appeared moments later. Then I finally understand politics. The warmth growing between them made the unanswered 30 days more uncomfortable, not less. Emily wanted to ask. Each time, she remembered Ryan's expression at the wedding and waited. On the 6th night, she returned from the infirmary shortly after 2 in the morning and found Ethan sitting alone beside a tall corridor window. Snow reflected pale moonlight across the floor. His eyes were closed, and one hand was pressed against his left ear. Emily approached from the front, so her shadow entered his vision before she did. Ethan immediately lowered his hand. Do not do that, she said. His eyebrows lifted. Pretend you are not hurting. Ethan reached for the small notebook he had begun carrying whenever she was nearby. It passes. How often? He hesitated. Most nights. Emily's concern sharpened. May I look? Ethan studied her, then nodded. She took a small oil lamp from the wall table and positioned herself carefully beside him. The outside of his ear appeared normal. No swelling. No visible irritation. Emily adjusted the flame and used the small brass viewing instrument from her medicine case. Tell me if the pressure changes. Ethan nodded again. She shifted the angle. Nothing. Then the light caught something deep inside his left ear. Emily stopped breathing. A narrow glimmer appeared for less than a second, dark at its center and silver along one edge. She moved the lamp back. It vanished. Forward again. There. Ethan saw her expression change. He reached for the notebook. What did you see? Emily did not answer until she had checked a 3rd time. The same dark reflection remained exactly where it should not have been. She lowered the instrument slowly. I do not know yet. Ethan's gaze hardened. Emily held his eyes. But I know this much. That is not normal. 12 years of silence had been explained to Ethan as permanent damage. Now, less than 1 week after entering his life, the Omega he had chosen because of a wager was staring into his left ear at something no one had ever told him was there. Emily did not touch the dark glimmer again. Seeing something unusual was not the same as understanding it, and her mother had taught her never to let curiosity move faster than caution. She lowered the brass instrument and sat across from Ethan beside the moonlit window. He watched her face, waiting. "Were you born deaf?" she asked. Ethan's expression changed immediately. He opened his notebook. "No." Emily felt the answer settle heavily between them. "When did you lose your hearing?" His pencil remained motionless for several seconds before he wrote, 12 years ago. "I was 19. Emily glanced toward his left ear. "What happened?" Ethan leaned back, his eyes fixed on the snow beyond the window, as though the memory waited somewhere outside. Then he began writing. There was a succession ceremony, an old Blackwood tradition performed when the heir begins assuming greater royal responsibilities. He paused. "I remember entering the ceremonial chamber. Candles, incense, silver bells. I remember hearing all of them." Emily waited while his pencil moved again. "The next morning, I woke up and everything was silent." She read the sentence twice. "Completely." Ethan nodded. "Both ears." Another nod. Emily's concern deepened. "Did your left ear hurt then?" He wrote, "For weeks. The pain became less frequent, but it never disappeared." "And the right?" "No pain. Only silence." That difference bothered her. One painful ear. Both ears unable to hear. If ordinary physical damage had caused the condition, the pattern made little sense. "Who examined you first?" Ethan did not hesitate this time. "Dr. Victor Hale." Emily knew the name. Every healer in the Northern Territories did. Victor had served the Blackwood royal family for decades. His medical authority was nearly as unquestioned as Ethan's political authority. "What did he tell you?" Ethan wrote, "Permanent damage. No treatment would restore what was lost." Emily looked at him, and everyone after him agreed. Eventually. One word, but she understood what it meant. Once the most respected healer in the kingdom had named the condition permanent, every examination afterward had begun with his conclusion already waiting at the end. Emily stood and retrieved her medicine case. "I want to see your original medical records." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "All of them," she added. "Especially the first month." He wrote, "You think Victor was wrong." Emily shook her head. "I think I do not have enough evidence to decide whether he was right." Ethan studied her for a long moment. "Most people would give me hope." Emily faced him directly. "Hope is not medicine. Truth first. Hope afterward." Something softened in his eyes. He nodded and wrote an authorization for the Royal Archive. Emily should have returned to her room then, but sleep felt impossible. Shortly before 3 in the morning, she opened an old cedar trunk containing the belongings she had kept after her mother's death. Beneath folded linen and bundles of dried lavender lay several worn leather journals. Emily carried them to her desk and began turning pages. Remedies, anatomical sketches, notes about wolf senses. Halfway through the third journal, her hand stopped. A drawing filled the page. It showed a thin object with a dark center and a narrow silver edge, almost identical to the glimmer she had seen inside Ethan's ear. Emily brought the candle closer. Beneath the drawing, her mother had written a name in careful letters. Silverwake sensory thorn. Emily read the notes below it, and the room suddenly felt colder. Silverwake did not destroy a wolf's senses. It suppressed them by binding to the natural energy of certain bloodlines. One thorn could silence an entire sensory pathway, even when placed on only one side of the body. Emily stared at the page. Ethan had not necessarily lost his hearing 12 years ago. Someone might have locked it away. Emily did not sleep. By sunrise, her mother's journal lay open beside 3 pages of handwritten notes, and the words Silverwake sensory thorn had become impossible to dismiss. The description matched too many details: sudden sensory loss, pain triggered by vibration, one-sided placement affecting an entire sensory pathway, and unusual persistence in wolves carrying old royal bloodlines. But resemblance was not proof. Emily needed records. Ethan's authorization opened the Royal Archive before breakfast, and 2 attendants delivered 3 heavy boxes to a private reading room. 12 years of medical history waited inside. Emily began with the oldest file, The first report was dated the morning after Ethan's succession ceremony. Complete hearing loss. Severe pressure in the left ear. Intermittent dizziness. No visible external injury. Doctor. Victor Hale's signature appeared beneath the diagnosis. Emily turned the page. 3 days later, the pain remained. Victor's signature. 1 week later, hearing unchanged. Victor's signature. By the end of the first month, the wording changed from unexplained sensory loss to permanent auditory damage. Yet Emily could find no record describing how that conclusion had been proven. Later healers had repeated it until repetition became certainty. Shortly before noon, Emily carried the files and her mother's journal into the Royal Medical Council chamber. Ethan was already seated at the head of the long oak table. Ryan stood nearby. 6 senior healers occupied the remaining chairs. Victor Hale arrived last. His white hair was perfectly arranged, his dark blue coat immaculate, his expression politely curious until Emily placed the old journal on the table. "I believe the original diagnosis should be reconsidered," Emily said, facing Ethan so he could read her lips. Victor gave a restrained smile. "After 1 week in the palace?" "After reading 12 years of records." She opened the earliest file. His Majesty lost hearing in both ears overnight, but only the left ear developed persistent pain. Certain vibrations still trigger that pain. "Last night, I observed a dark reflective object inside the left ear." One healer leaned forward. Victor did not. "Reflections are common during examination," he said. Emily opened her mother's journal to the drawing. "So are mistakes." The room cooled. Victor looked at the page and gave a short laugh. "Silverwake? That belongs to abandoned folk medicine. Then explain why its documented effects match his symptoms." "Your mother was not a royal physician." Emily felt the insult, but she refused to carry it where Victor wanted. "Neither my mother's reputation nor mine changes what is inside his ear." Victor turned toward Ethan. "Your Majesty, this young Omega is proposing that respected healers have been wrong for 12 years. Ryan repeated the words where Ethan could see him. Ethan's expression became unreadable. Emily knew this was the moment when confidence could become arrogance. She chose honesty instead. "I am proposing nothing beyond another examination," she said. "I could be wrong." Victor blinked. Emily continued. "But if I am wrong, we lose an hour. If everyone else was wrong, he has already lost 12 years. Silence settled across the council table. Ethan stared at her. Victor's smile disappeared. Emily turned the journal toward the king and pointed to the passage explaining how a single thorn could suppress an entire sensory pathway through royal wolf energy. This would explain why one object in the left ear could silence both ears. Ethan read carefully. Then he reached for his writing pad. Victor spoke before the pencil touched paper. "There is no reason to pursue this. Too fast. Too certain." Emily looked up. Victor's hand had tightened against the edge of the table. Ethan noticed it too. He finished writing and pushed the page toward Ryan. Ryan read the message aloud. "There is one reason. I want the truth." Victor went completely still. Ethan turned to Emily and wrote another sentence. "Examine me again." Emily looked from the king to Victor, and for the first time, the royal healer did not look offended by her theory. He looked afraid. Ethan's order ended the argument, but it did not end the tension. Victor Hale remained seated while the other healers exchanged uneasy glances, as though 12 years of certainty had suddenly become something fragile. Emily closed her mother's journal and faced Ethan directly. "Before I examine you again, I need you to understand something." His silver-gray eyes stayed on her lips. "Finding an object does not mean I know how to remove it safely. If it is silverwake, your wolf may have adapted to its presence over 12 years. I will not promise a cure simply because everyone in this room wants one." Victor seized on the words. "Then this should stop here." Emily ignored him. Ethan reached for his writing pad. "What are you asking me to decide?" She placed the journal beside his medical records. "Whether you want me to keep looking." Ethan frowned slightly. Emily continued. "Not because I am your wife. Not because Victor disagrees with me. Not because the council expects an answer. I need you to decide whether you want the truth even. If the truth does not restore your hearing." Something shifted in his expression. For years, physicians had told Ethan what his silence meant. Permanent. Irreversible. Finished. Emily was offering no comforting certainty. She was offering a choice. Victor rose. "Your Majesty, I strongly advise against allowing an inexperienced healer to continue. Ethan looked toward Ryan. Ryan repeated Victor's words where Ethan could see them. Emily felt the old instinct to defend herself rise, then let it go. She did not need to win an argument. Ethan needed information. She opened the journal to the silverwake entry and placed her notes beside it. This is what I found. These are the symptoms that match. These are the parts one still do not understand. Ethan read every line. Emily waited. Finally, he wrote, "And if you are wrong, then I admit I was wrong. And if you are right." Emily glanced toward Victor before returning her gaze to Ethan. Then someone should have asked these questions 12 years ago. Victor's face tightened. Ethan saw that too. He pushed back his chair and stood. Then he wrote 3 words and turned the page toward the council. "Leave us alone." Victor stepped forward. "Your Majesty." Ethan pointed toward the door. No anger. No threat. Only command. Ryan guided the council members out, leaving Emily and Ethan in the enormous chamber with the medical boxes between them. Ethan wrote another question. "Are you afraid?" Emily considered lying. "Yes." His eyebrows lifted. "Of Victor?" She shook her head. "Of giving you hope I cannot justify." Ethan stared at her for several seconds. Emily reached for his pencil and, after receiving a small nod, wrote beneath his question. "I do not need you to believe me. I need you to decide whether you want the truth." Ethan read the sentence slowly. When he looked up, the distance she had always seen behind his eyes seemed smaller. He wrote, "I do." That afternoon, the Eastern Infirmary was cleared for a private examination. Emily positioned a bright lamp beside the high-back chair and prepared her mother's brass viewing instrument. Ethan sat without hesitation. She approached where he could see her. "If anything changes, raise your hand." He nodded. Emily angled the light carefully into his left ear. Nothing appeared at first. She shifted the instrument slightly. A narrow black shape flashed beneath the light. Her pulse jumped. She adjusted the angle again. This time the silver edge remained visible. Ethan saw the answer on her face before she spoke. He reached for the notebook on his knee. "Is it there?" Emily checked once more. "Yes." Ethan's gaze dropped to the journal beside her. Emily studied the object, noticing something she had missed before. It did not rest loosely inside the ear. A faint silver shimmer seemed to pulse around it in rhythm with Ethan's own energy. She lowered the instrument. "It is there," she repeated, "but it is not simply stuck inside your ear." Ethan waited. Emily looked directly at him. "It is attached to you." Emily lowered the brass viewer and gave herself several seconds before speaking. The discovery had answered one question and created several more. The silverwake thorn was real, but the faint shimmer surrounding it behaved less like an ordinary obstruction and more like a thread woven into Ethan's natural alpha energy. She opened her mother's journal again and traced the faded notes with one finger. Ethan watched her from the examination chair. "Can it be removed?" he wrote. Emily looked at him. "Possibly, but not by simply pulling it out." His expression tightened. She turned the journal so he could read a passage her mother had underlined years ago. Silverwake did not remain in place through pressure alone. In wolves with powerful bloodlines, it could bind itself to the sensory pathway it was designed to suppress. The longer it remained, the deeper that bond became. Emily pointed toward the final sentence. "If I move it before weakening that connection, your wolf may resist the change." Ethan wrote, "What does that mean?" "Pressure, dizziness, disorientation, possibly temporary changes in your other senses. I cannot predict exactly how 12 years of adaptation will respond." He read her lips without looking away. Could it make things worse? Emily hated the question because honesty offered no comfort. "Yes." Ethan leaned back. For a moment, the Alpha King disappeared beneath the man who had spent almost half his life inside silence. Emily could imagine what hope must feel like after 12 years without it. Not warm. Dangerous. Something fragile enough to hurt merely by holding it. She began gathering her instruments. "We do not have to decide tonight." Ethan reached out and touched the edge of the table to stop her. He wrote, "What would you need?" Emily glanced down at her mother's notes. "Time. Better light. Witnesses. And a way to weaken the thorn's connection before moving it." She explained that her mother's journal described a controlled sequence using low vibration and brass, a metal that did not intensify silverwake. Nothing would be forced. If Ethan reacted badly, she would stop immediately. He wrote another question. Have you done this before? Emily shook her head. No. His eyes narrowed slightly. Has anyone alive? Not that I know of. A faint, humorless smile crossed his face. Comforting. Emily almost smiled back. You asked for the truth. That changed something between them. Ethan looked down at the notebook, then wrote slowly. And you keep giving it to me. Emily became still. The words carried more weight than he could know. The secret of 30 days remained between them, invisible to him and painfully visible to her. For 1 second, she almost asked. Instead, Ethan turned the page and wrote, If you were me, would you do it? Emily considered the question carefully. I would want to know whether the silence belonged to me or was put there by someone else. Ethan's gaze lifted sharply. Emily continued, But this is not my choice. The room remained quiet. Ethan looked toward the rain beginning beyond the infirmary windows. He could see it streaking the glass, but could not hear a single drop. After a long moment, he wrote, Prepare everything. Emily nodded. Tomorrow evening. She closed the journal, but Ethan caught her attention before she could turn away. His pencil moved once more. Emily. She waited. He wrote only 3 words. I trust you. Her throat tightened. She wanted those words to feel like victory. Instead, they reminded her of everything he still had not told her. Emily folded the note carefully and placed it beside the journal. Then I will be worthy of it. Later that night, while studying the silverwake entry again, she discovered a line written so close to the binding that she had missed it before. Royal silverwake was rarely made without identification. A commissioned thorn carried the mark of the house that ordered it. Emily stared at the sentence until the candle beside her burned low. If she could safely free the object from Ethan's ear, she might not only restore what had been taken from him, she might discover who had taken it. The Eastern Infirmary looked different the next evening. Emily had cleared the central table, arranged her mother's brass instruments beneath the brightest lamp, and placed a shallow silver tray beside Ethan's chair. Ryan stood near the windows as an official witness. 3 senior healers waited several feet away. Victor Hale had been summoned because his name appeared throughout Ethan's original medical records. But from the moment he entered, his attention remained fixed on Emily's instruments rather than the king. Ethan noticed. Emily noticed more. She approached Ethan from the front. We begin only when you are ready. He nodded. If you feel anything unusual, raise your hand, and I stop immediately. Another nod. Emily positioned the brass viewer and found the dark silver edge inside his left ear. Before attempting to move it, she followed her mother's notes, creating a gentle sequence of low vibrations through the brass instrument. Ethan's shoulders stiffened at the first pulse. Emily stopped. He waited several seconds, then motioned for her to continue. The faint silver shimmer surrounding the thorn began to weaken. Emily's heartbeat quickened. It was working. Not quickly, not dramatically, but the object no longer seemed woven so tightly into Ethan's energy. Victor stepped closer. This should end now. Ryan moved into Ethan's side and repeated the warning. Ethan looked at Victor, then shook his head. Emily continued. Minutes passed. The room became so quiet that she could hear rain beginning against the high windows. Finally, the silver shimmer faded too. A thin thread. Emily lowered the brass instrument and reached for a narrow pair of forceps. The connection is weaker, she told Ethan. I'm going to test whether the thorn can move freely. I will not remove it unless I am certain. Ethan washed her lips and nodded. Emily guided the forceps carefully toward the exposed edge. The moment she touched it, Ethan's fingers tightened around the chair arm. She stopped. Pressure. He nodded. Pain. He shook his head. Emily waited until his breathing settled, then adjusted the angle by the smallest amount. The thorn shifted. Barely, but it moved without the silver shimmer returning. Emily released a breath she had not realized she was holding. Victor's face had lost color. Emily, he said sharply. She ignored him. Another careful movement brought a fraction more of the object into view. Ryan leaned forward. One of the senior healers whispered something Emily could not make out. Then the examination lamp struck the exposed silver edge. There was something engraved on it. Emily froze. What is it? Ryan asked. She adjusted the light. The marking was tiny, no larger than a grain of rice, but unmistakably deliberate. A crowned wolf. Above it, 3 winter stars. Victor stepped backward. Emily looked up. His reaction came too quickly to hide. Ethan could not hear the sudden change in Victor's breathing, but he saw the fear on the physician's face. He reached for his notebook. "What did you find?" Emily kept the forceps steady. "A symbol." Ethan wrote. "What symbol?" Before she could answer, Victor moved toward the table. "You have seen enough." Ryan immediately stepped between him and Emily. No one touched anyone. No one needed to. Every person in the room understood that something had changed. Ethan rose halfway from the chair, his silver-gray eyes fixed on Victor. Emily looked again at the engraving, remembering the sentence hidden near the binding of her mother's journal. A commissioned thorn carried the mark of the house that ordered it. She had expected a craftsman's mark, perhaps an old healer's seal. Not this. The crowned wolf beneath 3 winter stars belonged to a branch of the Blackwood family, whose crest Emily had seen in the palace history gallery. She looked at Ethan, then at Victor. "This was not an accident," she said. Victor went completely still. Emily's grip remained steady as the truth settled over the room. Someone had not merely hidden a thorn inside the Alpha King. Someone had signed it. Emily kept the forceps perfectly still. The tiny crowned wolf beneath 3 winter stars gleamed under the examination lamp, while Victor stood several feet away looking as though the symbol had spoken his name. Ethan saw his reaction. He reached for the notebook on his knee and wrote, "Do you recognize it?" Emily looked at Victor, then back at Ethan. "I recognize the crest. I do not yet know what it means." Victor found his composure first. "It means nothing unless that object is authenticated." Ryan repeated his words where Ethan could see them. Ethan's gaze hardened, but Emily raised one hand. "He is right about one thing. We preserve it first. Questions afterward." She returned her attention to the thorn. The silver shimmer binding it to Ethan's energy had weakened to almost nothing. "I think it can be released now." Ethan nodded. Emily moved the forceps a fraction of an inch. The thorn shifted freely. Ethan closed his eyes. His breathing changed, but his hand remained lowered. "Pain?" Emily asked. He shook his head. "Pressure?" A nod. She waited. Then she continued, slowly enough that every second seemed to stretch across the room. The dark center emerged first, followed by the engraved silver edge. For 12 years, something smaller than Emily's little finger had held an entire sense behind a locked door. Then the last faint thread of silver light disappeared. The thorn came free. Emily moved her hand over the tray and released it. Clink. Ethan's eyes opened. He did not breathe. Emily froze. The silver tray sat motionless beneath the lamp. Ethan stared at it. "Ethan?" Ryan asked. No response. Then Ethan lifted one finger, asking everyone to remain still. His expression had changed from tension to bewilderment. Something had reached him. Faint. Thin. Almost impossible to recognize after 12 years. Rain touched the windows. Ethan turned his head toward the glass. His eyes widened. Another drop. Then dozens. Then hundreds, soft and uneven, spreading across the night like a language his memory had nearly forgotten. He stood slowly. The fireplace gave a quiet crackle behind him. Cloth whispered when Ryan shifted his sleeve. One of the senior healers drew a trembling breath. Ethan turned toward each sound as though discovering the room piece by piece. Emily's eyes burned with emotion, but she stayed where he could see her. She did not want to overwhelm him. "Can you hear anything?" she asked softly. Ethan looked at her lips from habit. His face tightened with concentration. Emily moved one step to his left, outside the angle he usually needed for lip reading. She swallowed. "Ethan." His head turned toward her voice. Not toward her mouth. Toward her. Emily covered her lips with one hand. Ethan stared at her, wonder breaking through every layer of royal control. "Emily," he said. The sound of his own voice stopped him. His hand rose toward his throat. He tried again, quieter. "Emily." Tears filled her eyes. "Yes." Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, listening to that single word as though it were music. When he opened them, he smiled at her with an expression she had never seen before. Then Ryan spoke behind them. "We need to secure the thorn." Ethan heard him. His smile vanished. Emily looked down at the silver tray. Under the brighter light, the engraving was completely visible now. The crowned wolf. 3 winter stars. Ethan stepped beside her and stared at it. Recognition came instantly. His face went still. He looked toward Victor. "Wintermere," Ethan said. Victor lowered his eyes. Ryan's expression darkened with understanding. Emily remembered the palace history gallery and the old portraits belonging to the Blackwood branch that had once challenged Ethan's succession. The joy in the room changed into something colder. Ethan had just received back the world of sound, but the first truth waiting inside, it was devastating. His silence had never been fate. Someone had chosen it for him. Ethan did not ask Victor another question until the thorn had been sealed inside a small glass evidence container. He stood beside the infirmary table, listening to sounds that should have felt miraculous, yet every new sound now seemed attached to the same unbearable thought. Someone had chosen his silence. Ryan ordered the original succession records brought from the Royal Archive. Less than an hour later, 2 clerks entered carrying a cedar document box sealed with the Blackwood crest. Ethan heard the hinges creak when Ryan opened it. Such a small sound. 12 years ago, he would never have noticed it. Now it seemed impossible to ignore. Emily remained beside him without touching him. She understood that comfort offered too quickly could feel like another decision made on his behalf. Ryan unfolded the attendance record from the ceremony. Lord Marcus Blackwood of Wintermere, he read. Ethan's late uncle. The man who had publicly challenged Ethan's succession before withdrawing from court years later. Ryan continued through the names until his voice slowed. Dr. Victor Hale. Ethan turned. Victor stood near the far end of the room, his face pale beneath the lamplight. You were there, Ethan said. Victor lowered his gaze. Yes. Ethan seemed startled by the sound of his own anger, though his voice never rose. You examined me the next morning. Yes. You told me the damage was permanent. Victor said nothing. Emily opened the oldest medical report and placed it beside the evidence container. There is no documented test supporting that conclusion. Victor looked at her. For the first time, there was no superiority in his expression, only exhaustion. Because there was no test. The confession landed more heavily than a shout could have. Ethan stared at him. Victor slowly sat down. Lord Marcus believed the council would never accept him while you remained the unquestioned heir. He wanted you weakened politically, not physically harmed. He told me the silverwake effect would last several days, perhaps a week. Long enough to create doubt during the succession hearings. Ethan's jaw tightened. And when my hearing did not return? Victor closed his eyes. I was afraid. Rain whispered against the windows. Ethan heard every drop. So you lied. Victor nodded. At first, I told myself I needed time to find a solution. Then days became weeks. By admitting the truth, I would have exposed Marcus, destroyed my position, and admitted what I had allowed. I changed the diagnosis. After that, every healer who examined you began with my records. Emily looked down at the pages she had read that morning. Repetition had become authority. Authority had become truth. Ethan turned toward the window. 12 years. He remembered council meetings where people had spoken while facing away from him. Ceremonies where music existed only as movement. Nights when pain in his left ear had reminded him of something no physician could explain. All those years, he had believed his silence belonged to fate. Did Marcus know it became permanent? Ethan asked. Victor nodded reluctantly. Yes. Ethan closed his eyes. When he opened them, there was no satisfaction in his expression. Ryan, begin a formal inquiry. Every record connected to the ceremony is to be preserved. Victor will answer to the council through lawful proceedings. Ryan nodded. There were no threats. No spectacle. Only accountability. Victor was escorted from the infirmary, and Ethan listened to the door close behind him. Emily remained beside the table. I am sorry, she said. Ethan looked at her. You gave me back my hearing. I gave you an answer. Your body did the rest. A faint smile touched his face. You always refuse the easier version. The easier version is usually less accurate. Ethan laughed softly, then stopped in wonder because he could hear himself doing it. Emily smiled. For one fragile moment, the darkness of the evening loosened. Ethan looked at her as rain filled the room with quiet music. Your voice was the first one I heard clearly. Emily's eyes softened. Then I am glad the first thing I said was your name. Ethan took one careful step toward her, but the infirmary doors opened before he could speak again. Madison Reed stood in the doorway. Her gaze moved from Ethan to Emily, then to the sealed silverwake thorn. So it is true, she said. Ethan turned toward the sound of her voice. Madison's expression hardened. Now that you can hear again, perhaps your wife should finally hear the truth about why you married her. Madison's words seemed louder than anything Ethan had heard since the silverwake thorn fell into the tray. Emily did not look at her. She looked at him. Ethan saw the recognition already forming in her pale green eyes, and suddenly the secret he had postponed felt uglier than it had beneath the glittering lights of the winter moonball. "Emily," he said. She lifted one hand. "Let her finish." Madison stepped farther into the infirmary. 30 days, she said. Emily's expression barely changed, but Ethan remembered the wedding reception and understood what she must have seen. "That was what you said to Ryan after the ceremony," Emily replied. Madison smiled without warmth. "Because 30 days was the wager. I told Ethan he could not remain married to an ordinary Omega for 1 month without regretting it." The rain continued against the windows. Emily heard it, as she always had. Ethan heard it now too, but all his attention remained on her. "And he accepted?" Emily asked. Madison looked toward Ethan. "Ask your husband." Emily did. "Did you?" There was no notebook between them anymore. No silence. No place for Ethan to hide inside carefully chosen written words. "Yes." Emily's fingers tightened around her mother's journal. "When you chose me across that ballroom, was it because of the wager?" Ethan swallowed. "At first, yes." She nodded slowly, as though confirming a diagnosis she had hoped was wrong. "When I asked why you wanted to marry me, you said I noticed something others did not." That was true. It was not the whole truth. Ethan lowered his eyes. "No." Madison seemed to expect anger, perhaps humiliation, but Emily gave her neither. She turned back to Ethan. "I spent this week wondering what 30 days meant. I knew something was wrong, but I kept waiting because I thought if there was a truth between us, you would eventually trust me enough to tell me." Ethan took a step toward her, then stopped. The wager stopped mattering almost immediately. Emily's eyes glistened. "But it mattered when you chose me." He had no answer that could change that. "Yes." Her gaze drifted toward the sealed thorn. "Do you understand? What I have been trying to give you since the night we met." Ethan remained silent. "Choice," she said. "I wanted you to know what was happening inside your own body. I wanted you to decide whether to be examined, whether to take the risk, whether you wanted the truth even if it hurt." Her voice trembled for the first time. "Because your life belonged to you." Ethan closed his eyes. He knew what came next before she said it. "And you let me enter a marriage without giving me the same choice." Madison's satisfaction disappeared. This was no longer entertainment. Ethan looked at Emily. "You are right." She seemed almost surprised that he did not defend himself. "I was arrogant. I accepted something cruel because I wanted to prove I could. Then I met you, and every day I waited made telling you harder. That does not excuse it." Emily looked down at her wedding ring. Slowly, she removed it and placed it beside Ethan's notebook. The small sound against the wooden table reached him clearly. Of all the sounds returned to him, this one hurt most. "Was I ever anything more than a joke to you?" she asked. "Yes." His answer came instantly. "Long before you healed me. Long before tonight. But I understand why my word may not be enough now." Emily picked up her medicine case. Ethan did not touch her. He did not command the doors closed. He had spent 12 years learning what it meant to have choices taken from him. He would not take hers now. At the doorway, Emily stopped. "I hope you never lose your hearing again," she said without turning. "But hearing the truth and living truthfully are not the same thing." Then she walked into the corridor. Ethan listened to her footsteps grow quieter until there was nothing left but rain. 12 years of silence had ended that night. Yet standing beside the ring she had left behind, Ethan discovered that the cruelest sound in the world was someone choosing to walk away. By noon the next day, the great council hall was full. Pack leaders, royal healers, senior advisors, and witnesses from the winter moon ball filled the long rows beneath the Blackwood crest. Emily entered through the side doors wearing the same simple forest green dress she used in the infirmary. Ethan had reserved no throne beside his own for her. Instead, a chair waited near the front with an open path to the doors. Even now, he was giving her a choice. Ethan rose. For several seconds, he listened to the room. Papers shifting, shoes against stone, the low crackle of the fireplace. Whispers from people who had forgotten he could finally hear them. "Yesterday, I learned that my deafness was deliberately caused 12 years ago," he said. The whispers stopped. "Dr. Victor Hale has admitted his involvement. A formal inquiry will determine every person responsible, and judgment will follow our laws." Ethan paused, then looked toward Emily. "But there is another truth this court deserves to hear, because hiding it would make me no better than the people who decided what truths I was allowed to know." Madison lowered her gaze. Ethan continued. I married Emily Carter because I accepted a cruel wager. Shock moved through the hall. Madison Reed proposed it. I accepted it. That decision was mine, and the responsibility is mine. Ryan stepped forward carrying the written terms of the wager. Ethan took the paper, tore it once, and placed the pieces on the council table. There is no winner. There was never anything honorable to win. Emily watched him without smiling. Ethan descended from the royal platform until only several feet remained between them. Emily owed me nothing. She was mocked for her rank, questioned for her experience, and dismissed because she was an Omega. Still, she noticed my pain when everyone else had stopped looking. She gave me the truth when hope would have been easier. She gave me choices when authority had taken them away. His voice softened, and I failed to give her the same. No one moved. This marriage continues only if Emily chooses it. If she chooses to leave, the crown will respect that decision completely. Emily stood. Ethan's breathing changed, but he did not reach for her. She walked toward the doors. Every instinct that had once made him a king told him to speak, command, fix, control. He did none of those things. At the doorway, Emily stopped and looked back. Ethan met her eyes. I am not asking you to forgive me today, he said. I am asking for the chance to become someone whose honesty does not depend on being caught. Something in Emily's expression softened. She gave him the smallest nod. Not forgiveness, not a promise, but not goodbye. Then she left. Weeks passed. Ethan learned sound slowly. Rain became familiar. Music remained overwhelming. He discovered that Ryan laughed much louder than expected, and that council chambers contained an astonishing number of unnecessary coughs. Emily returned to her work in the Eastern Infirmary. Ethan never used his title to summon her. One winter morning, he found her beside the window arranging bottles of herbs while humming quietly to herself. He stopped at the doorway and listened. Emily noticed him. You could knock. Ethan smiled. I did. She raised an eyebrow. Apparently being able to hear has made you less convincing. He laughed, and this time the sound no longer surprised him. Then his expression grew serious. May I come in? Emily looked at him for a long moment. Yes. Ethan entered but stopped several feet away. He asked for nothing more. Emily studied the man who had once chosen her because of pride and the man standing before her now, willing to accept whatever she chose. Slowly, she extended her hand. Ethan looked at it before looking at her. Only when Emily nodded did he step forward and take it. Outside, snow drifted quietly over Blackwood Palace. Inside, Ethan heard Emily's breathing, the fire, and the soft movement of glass bottles beside them. Once, he had believed power meant never waiting for permission. Now he understood something greater. Power could make an entire kingdom listen. Trust was what made one person choose to stay.